Welcome to another episode of Keeping It Realty with Marc and Brian. So before we get into the show, big shout out to East Brother Beer Company for being the show sponsor. Always a good time at their bar, and always a good time when you're sipping a beer at, well, it's not quite morning now. It's 12:30 as of the filming of the show.
Right. So we're not that bad for ingesting alcoholic beverages before 1 p.m.
Yeah. Okay.
Plus, it's for the good of the show.
It is. So we're going to get into the very first topic here and talking about what's been making news lately. And it's really the person who has made $1 billion in losses. And this is mind-boggling, but our President Trump, his tax returns from the 80s and 90s, I think from 85 to 95.
1985 to 1994.
1994. So 10 years worth of tax returns. And he used up almost $1 billion in losses.
Actually, $1.17 billion in losses is what he says in real estate losses. And as a matter of fact, so a lot of what's boggling people's mind in this is, one, is he that poor of a business person that he lost that much money? And then the other question, of course, is how do you lose that much money and still stay in business, right?
One of the arguments that he quickly and some White House administrative officials came out with is, oh, well, in real estate, you get depreciation, and you can use depreciation in order to write off additional losses. These are paper losses, not actual losses. And that's the excuse that they were going with in why he added up $1 billion in losses.
And I can speak directly to that. In fact, I'm a real estate investor. I'm a real estate, an owner of real estate income, and I spend a majority of my time and the majority of my money is made from real estate, not just real estate sales, but collecting rents. And because of that, what Marc is referring to is that I can take an unlimited amount of depreciation on my assets. And to kind of give you an idea and this is the excuse that Trump is using, by the way, but as I read this, and I love to reverse calculate things, however, just going through the narrative of what he's talking about, it's hard to really sink your teeth into a specific property where you can pull the public records and then kind of begin to unravel it. But it looks to me as though that these were actual losses. And so to kind of understand, I'm just going to put a few definitions out there. So typically you'll hear people, even real estate agents or people who are working for themselves, self-employed, 1099, they'll use write-offs. Now, write-offs are real actual expenses that you've spent during a 12-month period. And there's items that are expensable from the IRS standpoint, and then there's those that are not. And some people will push the limit as to what they can write off or expense. And all of that is so that they can reduce their bottom line as to what's taxable. So just making it really simple, you gross $200,000 of income, and you write off $180,000 of expenses, right? And the IRS didn't audit you, you got away with it. And so you're only paying taxes on the net income of $20,000, right? Now, when you go to apply for a loan, they're going to look at you and you only make $20,000 a year. It's not your gross income. And sometimes if the IRS looks really closely at you, they're going to say, okay, these expenses are not allowable. And they might deduct off some of that $180,000, and then you're going to be taxed on a little bit higher amount. Now, that's not what's going on here from what I could see, because those are yearly expenses. Then there's also things like capital losses. So, for example, you buy a property for $200,000, you put $100,000 down, and then the market goes really bad. And I'm just using small numbers. These numbers aren't real anymore. These are like monopoly numbers. But $200,000, you put $100,000 down of equity, you expect it to go up in value. And if it goes up in value and you sell it, then you have a realized gain. But if it goes down in value and you're forced to sell it, and for less than what you bought it for, then you're going to have a capital loss. And that's a real loss of money. And in real estate, when they're doing large deals, as what Trump is doing here, like on casinos and things of that nature, Trump isn't necessarily playing with his own money. He might be putting in 10% of his own money, but the majority of that money is raised from limited partners, accredited investors who are putting in the majority of the other equity, all with the belief that this guy, who is the general partner, in this case Trump, knows what he's doing, and he's going to be able to control their assets, placed in real estate and make a profit, a capital gain. In this case, it looks like he took some serious capital losses. And so because of that, he's able to take loss carry forwards. You only do that with capital losses. Again, these are major losses that are typically equivalent of your down payment, right, on a property, as opposed to a loss of income, meaning the property was supposed to make 100 grand a year and it only made 80. So those are actual losses of income. And then, of course, the big thing that everybody's asking about is depreciation. And in real estate, you can take residential income property, that's like apartment building, and you can take 80% of that, divide it over 27 and a half years and depreciate that. But if you're not in the business of real estate, you cannot take that entire loss. In fact, the majority of individuals, if they're gainfully employed, working for an employer, or even self-employed in a different line of work other than in real estate, like a real estate developer or real estate investor owning buildings, you cannot take the depreciation, the unlimited amount of depreciation. So in all of these excuses that Trump is talking about, where he used depreciation or accelerated depreciation, where instead of taking the normal 27 years, you're able to do what's called a cost allocation study and distinguish the exact real life effective ages of big components of your building, right, or asset. Like the roof only has a 10-year lifespan, so you don't take 27 years, or you don't take the 39 years that you're supposed to take on commercial property. And like the plumbing might have a 15-year lifespan. So in essence, you're segregating out all these different costs and you're cutting in half the time frame that you would take those depreciation losses, which, by the way, depreciation, as Marc pointed out, is just a paper loss. So you get to add it back to your income when you go to apply for a loan. But in all of the descriptions that Trump is bringing out here, where he had real loss carry forwards that he was able to take year after year, these were actual losses of equity that he took. It's hard to distinguish how much of it was actually his, because in a typical structure where you have general partners and limited partners, Trump isn't putting in all his own money. So that means that 90%, 80% of that equity that was raised on a bad venture was from other people, and he may have only put in 10 or 15%. But when you're talking numbers that are as large as his, these are billions of or millions and millions of dollars of carry forward and losses. So this story just doesn't jive. I don't have all the big picture. It's got a narrative here. If he was just taking accelerated depreciation, which he would have been allowed to take because he's in the business and he's able to overcome more than what his actual taxable income on that property is, and because he doesn't have a limit, he can take that depreciation and apply it to other places where he actually made money. So let me put that in perspective. When you take a building that says that makes 100 grand a year in net profit, but it has a $90,000 a year of depreciation straight line, you're only paying tax on $10,000 of that $100,000. However, if you can do a cost allocation or cost segregation study that takes these big components into place, you can almost double or triple that $90,000 a year. So now you might make that same $100,000, but you're writing off $190,000 or even $210,000. So you don't pay tax on that $100,000, and you might still be able to take that extra $100,000 to $110,000 of depreciation loss from accelerating your depreciation and wipe out additional income that you might have from other sources. Like you sold a building that was not a rental, it was like a flip, or in his case, he would have built new construction and then sold it off for a profit. He would have been able to apply that excess depreciation that an income generating asset would have had to ordinary income. And then he talks about tax credits. So after you've taken all of your different expensable items, the expensable items for the year that you're allowed, take your depreciation or accelerated depreciation against that income so that you are wiping out that taxable income. And let's suppose you still make more money than what your excess depreciation allows. Let's suppose you can take another $500,000 of income from the excess depreciation that you generate, and you made $800,000, right? So now you're getting taxed on $300,000 at whatever tax bracket. So in this case, probably 48%. So you'd owe $150,000 on that $300,000. Then you get to take tax credits for certain developments that you did. Well, in this case, all of these things that he's describing just don't seem to add up. It looks like he actually took real losses because he was able to carry them forward. They weren't accelerated depreciation carry forward, because you can't necessarily do that. You can only use it for the given year that you can apply for and can carry that forward. But again, the narrative doesn't really give the whole picture. So I think I'm gone way over my limit on this. Hopefully that kind of help, puts things into perspective on things, and we're going to try to go to the next topic. Marc,
okay.
Save me. I'm talking too much.
Okay, so next topic is the privatization of Fannie and Freddie Mac. So for many people that are not really familiar with how the mortgage industry works, so going back a little bit in history. So after the Great Depression, one of the big issues in order to trying to get people to boost the economy, get the economy going again, is the availability of funds for banks to lend out to businesses, to individuals, so people can buy cars, buy houses, reinvest in their business. And so what was happening is, if you were a bank and you lent, for example, $50,000 to an individual, well, then that individual owes you $50,000, but you as a bank then lost $50,000. You had no more capital at this point, and you were limited on what you could do. And so Fannie and Freddie Mac came into play because they became government-sponsored buyers of mortgages on the secondary market. So what the bank would then do is sell that actual loan to Fannie and Freddie Mac. Then Fannie and Freddie pays the bank. The bank then has new capital that they can then reinvest, and the entire circle economy keeps moving on.
In fact, let me just chime in really quick. And at that same time, the 1920s, what we take for granted today, which is the 30-year mortgage or even the 15-year mortgage, was something that just didn't exist in the 1920s. In fact, when you borrowed money, you had 5 years to pay it back or 10 years to pay it back. So if you do the simple math and you use that as your amortization timetable, you're going to have large monthly payments that the average person can't afford. And so as the government steps in and goes, hey, I've got a novel idea. Why don't you have an 80% loan to value, and instead of having people put 50% down, have them put 20% down? The bank's like, what, are you crazy? Because no, I will insure it. In fact, I'm going to create a secondary money market where after you've made that loan and taken that money from your from the savings that people put into your bank and loaned it out, we're going to replenish that supply, and then we're going to even insure it. And this was the beginnings of mortgage insurance. And then, because if the bank said, well, because the big question the bank had was, what if they don't pay it back? The government said, hey, I'm insuring it. I'm the government. I'll take care of you. And this is where veterans loans came into place, or FHA, these Federal Housing Administration. So it kept money circulating.
And it's a great system. It's a great system that's worked for many years. However, Fannie and Freddie ran into a very big problem 10 years ago during the financial crash. And when that financial crash happened and there were so many foreclosures, they could not insure. There was too many losses. And on top of it, mismanagement at the time, because Fannie and Freddie had strict requirements on the type of loans they were buying from banks, and pressure came down from the government to be more flexible on the types of loans that they were buying. And so they started to invest and buy subprime mortgages and buy them in large bulks. And when the market crashed, you saw exactly what happened with the number of foreclosures and the full market collapse. So with that happening, the Fannie and Freddie were basically insolvent. They could not insure, they could not continue running their business. And so the government had to come in and basically, through receivership, took them over, and the government now runs them. And to this day, even though all the problems have been fixed, to this day, the government still runs Fannie and Freddie. And the big debate is, well, at what point are we going to take Fannie and Freddie out of receivership and back into the private market? And my opinion is they're not going to do anything with it, because the reality is it's now become a cash cow for the Treasury. They're not going to let that go. There's no motivation by the government, the Treasury, to even let Fannie and Freddie go back into the private market. So this has been a discussion that's been coming up for a couple of years. And nothing's happening.
Right, right. And and the thing is that government traditionally is very inefficient about running business. So that's been the big question, is they're pointing out all these deficiencies. But then, of course, when private business comes in, it makes it a little too efficient and cuts corners. Sometimes people get a little bit footloose and then bad things happen.
Yeah, and it really comes down to being a cash cow. I mean, that's really what it is. They're not going to let that go.
Yeah, I don't think they will.
Yeah. Okay. So, we literally cut that one just in time.
We did.
Okay, and we kind of had to make up for it with the very first topic. You covered like
you
10
asked me to
minutes
cover
there.
a bunch of things that, and it's hard to condense all that.
Yeah. Okay, so our next topic, we're going to be talking about the tax credit support. So Assembly Bill 1590 will set aside $50 million for tax credits to allow first-time low and medium income home buyers to purchase a home in disadvantaged communities. And a disadvantaged community is defined as the top 25% scoring areas from the Cal Enviro screen, along with other areas with high amounts of pollution and low populations. So there's a lot of support from this at the state level. California Association of Realtors and a few other organizations are definitely backing and supporting this. And I think it's a good idea.
It's supposed to generate more sales and more home ownership, which was the whole intent of the original forefathers that founded the country, was to create hundreds of thousands of private land owners, not a small few. And so these tax credits are encouraged to get you to buy a house.
Yeah. Now, one of the problems, I guess, if we're going to pick this apart and really look at the various problems that this may generate, one of the problems I see is you're giving tax credits, basically money back to people who end up buying a home. So what typically happens when you start giving tax credits like that? Well, now a person may be able to afford a higher purchase price because of these tax credits. And one trend that you start to see is that people are willing to spend a little bit more, and you start to see home prices going up. Now, if you've been watching and following the show, one of the topics that we keep coming back to over and over again on the show is the high costs of living in the Bay Area, not just in rentals, but in buying homes. The cost to buy a home is so astronomical right now.
Well, these tax credits that they're talking about are typically aimed at being given to people who are buying in areas that are not so densely populated, right? So I think it's targeting areas like, Gilroy or Fairfield or things like that.
I mean, but if you see like, well, right here, Bay Area regions include North and South Richmond, Rodeo, East Martinez, Berkeley, west of San Pablo, and
okay,
yeah, so
that is pretty close. I mean, but nobody liked to go to North Richmond for a long time, although that's changed a lot.
But North Richmond, I mean, you have homes for $300,000, $350,000,
and there's a bunch of that are boarded up that they're getting ready to unlock and sell off in droves. But it is encouraged to get you to buy in these areas where people wouldn't traditionally buy. But in many of these, buying in those areas like North Richmond, because it's actually not a bad neighborhood to buy in anymore.
Yeah, and a lot of these neighborhoods have gone up so much in value that it's really expensive to even buy in these neighborhoods that are considered disadvantaged. So I guess if we're going to nitpick at this bill, I'm in support of it. I think it's a good bill, but if we're really going to look at the negative effect, it's going to encourage some of these neighborhoods to go up in value.
Oh, yeah.
And
it definitely will encourage
it's going to lower the affordability rate for the next generation of buyers. That's going to be the negative side effect, which that's a whole nother topic in itself, in that, hey, the solution to fixing this housing market is really building out more inventory.
I'm building out more inventory, supporting SB 50, but we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. Now, I haven't heard of, I'm going to refer to Sam right now, our producer. Sam, are there any opponents on this bill?
Not that I've read about yet.
Okay, so no opponents. I think everyone's really in full support of this.
Yeah, no, it's an incentive. The government will give you a credit against what you're going to eventually owe in taxes. It's the same incentive they gave for people to put solar on their homes or to buy electric cars. that if you buy this, they'll give you $5,000 as a tax credit, so that after you've taken your income, your expenses, and resolved how much you owe, you get to take that credit against what you actually owe, not off the top of what you make. So it's a good thing all around, but
Yeah,
I think it's a short-term fix.
and one of the questions is, well, how do they determine or how do they identify a disadvantaged community? And many times they look at what the median income is, and then basically look at the various zip codes and neighborhoods, and then they're able to they're able to determine it. And yeah, they're behind the times
because those neighborhoods were bad or not disadvantaged 10 years ago.
And if they're going off consensus data, which is what, every 2 or 4 years that really comes out, and they may be completely behind on information. So yeah, I mean, this is a great opportunity if you are looking to buy and looking to buy in one of these neighborhoods that are considered to be more affordable than other neighborhoods. With this bill, I think it'll eventually pass here later this year. I think it'd be a perfect opportunity to take advantage of.
Take advantage of it while it lasts, because the tax credits don't always last forever.
Okay, so our final topic here is ReMax and Redfin split up. So if you watched or listened to the last episode of Keeping It Realty, we did talk about ReMax basically putting it out there for Compass and for Zillow and Trulia, telling them that if you're going to cross over into our territory as a brokerage, then all bets are off and we're now enemies. I mean, it was kind of like Game of Thrones style-ish, how Redfin CEO came out.
I didn't think real estate would be so exciting.
And so we have ReMax and Redfin now that were partnered up. And basically a little history, in certain areas where Redfin didn't really have a big presence, they would sign up various contracts with ReMax and ReMax agents to where leads that Redfin gets, they would dispatch them out to ReMax. Now, that's those were certain areas. It's not everywhere because Brian, like you pointed out, you have a contract with Redfin to where even some of your agents get Redfin.
Right. In fact, when I was reading this, I didn't realize that that Redfin and ReMax had a thing going on. That was just their own little, private thing. Because Redfin generally has an agreement where they partner with different real estate offices, and it's not necessarily the entire office; it's agents that work within that office. So it's like, as Marc pointed out, I'm accustomed to signing referral agreements where Redfin will refer an agent in my office business and will take a 35% referral fee at the top, which is traditionally higher than what we would normally pay out as a referral fee. But that's because Redfin will split some of those fees off with the buyer for credits towards their non-recurring closing costs. So when this item came out about this almost an exclusive agreement between ReMax and Redfin, kind of took me a little bit by surprise, but I didn't even know that it existed. And it looks like it's not going to be existing for very long.
Yeah, and I guess this was supposed to be a 2-year deal between ReMax and Redfin, and it lasted only 2 months. And they're upset because of Redfin Direct, where they would bypass the buyer agent, and someone going through Redfin Direct would be able to make an offer. A buyer would be able to make an offer directly to the seller.
I wonder how that breakup conversation went. It's not you, it's me. No.
Well, all breakup conversations now are done on Twitter. It's not done in person or anything.
I know. There's
Twitter.
There's no more nuances to it.
Yeah. So going back to this, it's funny to me because there's a lot of hatred of Zillow, Trulia, these tech companies by big brokerages. And there's a clash going on right now between the traditional brokerage model and newer brokerage models and tech companies that focus on real estate. You have tech companies that focus on real estate like Zillow that get a lot of leads. They have a lot of public attention. They want to use that and leverage it. They're also a publicly traded company to where, hey, they have to respond to the shareholders. And if the shareholders want the business to succeed and make money, well, they're going to be looking at different ways to do that. Then you have Compass, that's a mix between technology and also really a traditional brokerage. And then you have ReMax, that's been your traditional brokerage like Coldwell Banker, Century 21. But then you have Redfin. Redfin's very interesting because
They have
Redfin,
W-2 employee real estate agents.
they completely operate completely different than anyone in the industry. And I think the one thing that really scares a lot of people about Redfin is that I really think Redfin is going to be the future of real estate brokerage models. One, you have great tech company through Redfin. I mean, so many people, so many buyers will go through Redfin and sign up for listings as opposed to the MLS through their own agent or even through Zillow because Redfin has a great system.
Well, in a prior episode, when we were discussing the possibility of real estate offices being forced to withhold taxes from the commissions of their real estate agents and essentially turn 1099 employees into W-2 employees, that's exactly the Redfin model. So you'd see more of that if that law actually passed, which would be a dramatic change in the way real estate offices are run, managing broker and agent or associate broker relationships.
Yeah, and Redfin's got a model to where they develop the technology to get the leads, just as good as Zillow or any other company. They get these leads, and then because they have agents that are on W-2 payroll, they're able to control everything that the agent does. So where Redfin really excels has been in customer service. They've been able to basically tell their agents that work for them, hey, we want you to be part of this process and here's how we're going to operate, which is why you can go onto your mobile phone and order, a showing within an hour, and you have a Redfin agent that shows up to show you the property. So they have really excelled in customer service, and I think that's really going to be the future of real estate brokerages. And I think that's why a lot of people are scared. And the fact that Redfin is now testing and figuring out a way to get rid of the buyer agent, which at the end of the day, it reduces expenses for consumers. And if you have a company like that that's reducing expenses for a consumer, it's a very dangerous company to compete against. Very hard to compete against that. And it's understandable why people are not liking Redfin and why ReMax is cutting the deal. But at the same time, I think ReMax has been behind the times for many years now.
Right. And at one point, they were actually the leader in the industry, coming up with very innovative ideas that kind of changed the industry and actually had butterfly effects that led to what you see in Redfin and Zillow and Encompass today.
Yep. Okay. So now let's get into our property analysis.
So today I'm just going to talk about different types of investments that are out there. Many times you'll hear me talk about property analysis on multi-unit, 4-unit buildings versus 5 units or more. And I'm now in the position where I'm selling one of my buildings and have $1 million I need to exchange into another asset or pay an ungodly amount of capital gains tax. So I've been looking at various types of investments that I haven't looked at traditionally. And one of those is gas stations. And one of the things that I've sold gas stations before, and one of the things that you're looking at with gas stations is whether or not you're buying just the business or the business and the real estate. And the numbers skew dramatically. So for example, I was looking at a gas station that included the real estate in San Ramon, and it was $5.1 million versus another one that I'm looking at in the El Cerrito area for $1.4 million, but it's just the business only. And the land is actually owned by somebody else, and you pay a monthly leasing fee. So there's various factors to weigh out when you're looking at gas stations and different things that you're looking at with as far as like return on your investment. So for example, one of the ones that I was focusing on very closely was an off-market deal in the El Cerrito area for $1.3 million. It doesn't include the real estate, and it would potentially be qualified for an SBA loan or Small Business Association loan that would enable me to come in with as little as 20% down. The problem I encountered with is that it's questionable whether or not I'm going to be able to 1031 exchange this to use my monies to exchange into this asset because it doesn't include the real estate, just the business. So it's an intangible business. And so I have to find myself looking at other property that includes real estate to put my exchange dollars in. But the reason I focused in on this one in El Cerrito was because even though I can't exchange into it, I do have other liquid assets that I could use to acquire it. In the particular instance here, the numbers looked really, really good. And now, as opposed to looking at capitalization rate, you're looking more at your ROI, where you're looking at the power of leverage. For example, if the business itself is asking $1.3 million. I can come in with as little as 20% down, $260,000. And the business itself grosses $6.2 million a year and nets about, on a good year, I've seen $250,000, but the average comes out to about $190,000 to $200,000 a year, which is still a very good return, especially if you're thinking that I'm coming in with about $260,000 and I'm going to be making $190,000 a year of net income after paying my lease, the gas costs, and things of this nature. Then I'm looking at a pretty hefty ROI, or return on investment. In fact, if you do the simple numbers on that, that's $190,000. My calculator is messing with me. Clear. There we go. $190,000 a year of net income over a capital outlay of $260,000. You're looking at like a 73% ROI. Now, of course, any good investor will take a 24-month or 3-year average, but also look at where the gas industry is going. I've had various friends chime in, and in fact, I've been calling different owners of gas stations and just kind of getting their opinion on things, because it just opened up a new facet of investment for me, because it's just a cash-run business. One strange thing about the gas business that's counterintuitive is that when the cost of the barrel of gas is high, you as a gas station owner don't actually make any money on the gas. In fact, it's just a loss leader, something to drive people to your station, where you actually make the majority of your money selling groceries or the snacks that people buy, drinks, and lottery tickets. Now, if I buy a gas station, obviously a big component of that is making sure I have proper employees and staff to go there, because, I just never been my dream to work at a gas station, but I would entertain owning one. And when you're looking at these different things, financing is going to be very key. And the amortization rate is going to be very key. You're not looking at your traditional 30-year amortizations. You're looking at more of 15 to 20-year amortizations, or in some cases, 10-year amortizations. Again, you're not buying the real estate, and you got to make sure you focus in on the length of the lease, and also whether it's a name brand gas station or a known brand like Arco or Shell. All of these different things have various caveats and contracts that could affect your bottom line, which I'm learning very quickly. In the past, I've just mainly been representing other gas station buyers, and although I do take a deep interest in the finances and how it all works, the majority of the time, it's the actual entrepreneur buying that gas station that kind of knows the various nuances where they'll make money, whether it's on a good location for lottery tickets or a good place they have a good connection with barrels of gas because they're a no-name brand company. So again, just another thing to kind of look at for various investments out there. If you have any questions about gas stations, feel free to give me a call. I got a ton of experience in selling them, and I might now be going out there buying.
I do know that Mexican cartels are getting out of the cocaine business and getting into the smuggling gasoline business.
Yes, that's crazy. In fact, I don't know why they didn't take all that capital and reinvest it in legitimate businesses and go off on other different things. They just bury their money in houses and plaster it in walls. Now they make movies about that kind of stuff.
Gold-plated guns.
Exactly, gold-plated guns. Just, I look at the amount of capital that goes to Mexican drug cartels. They just go, I wish I could show you what you could do to reinvest that.
And it would
wisely.
be, and it would be legal,
and it would be legitimate,
and they wouldn't go to jail.
And you wouldn't go to jail.
Well, maybe for old crimes.
Yeah,
but
just don't let me be seen with you in the same room, because people might think things.
So thanks for watching and listening to another episode of Keeping It Realty. Catch us next week for next week's episode. Thank you to East Brother Beer for sponsoring the show, and have a great day.
See you next week.